able to see.
Oops.
There we go. So thank you very much for permission to do that.
Yeah.
I think what I'll do is I will start out because it is 7:04. We had, I think, 18 or 19 registered for this, and we've got 15 with us now, so I think it's okay to get started. I will introduce our speakers first. Then I think what I'd like to do before they actually start with their program is perhaps to have each one of us just introduce who you are, what organization you represent, if you represent an organization, but what you hope to get from our speakers today. So anyway, first of all, I will start with Preston. Preston Brightwell is a Unite associate. Preston is an associate for Unite. His primary work is on the Dignity Index government initiative, as well as the corporate program. Prior to joining Unite, Preston completed several internships with national and local organizations, including the Governor's Office of Utah. And more recently, as a graduate student on the Dignity Index 2022 pilot, where the Dignity Index was first tested and validated. What excites him most about this work is the power it has to promote healthy disagreement and solve the most pertinent problems facing our nation. Preston holds a Master's of Public Administration and a Bachelor's in Political Science, both from the University of Utah. So welcome and thank you for being here, Preston.
Great to be here.
Thank you. Also with him for this presentation is Alexa Merrill. Alexa is a Dignity Index student ambassador. Alexa Merrill is a senior at Brigham Young University, pursuing a degree in sociology and a minor in business administration. Passionate about leadership, purpose finding, and authentic connection, they work as a peer-to-peer at BYU's Sorensen Center for Moral and Ethical Leadership, where they are dedicated to clarifying complex issues and empowering others to do the same. Alexa also works as Dignity Index Student Ambassador for Unite and is involved with furthering the connections between the Dignity Index and its concepts and students in the higher education space. So welcome, Alexa, also. So let's start with Sherry. Would you like to just say a little bit about who you are and why you're here today?
Thank you, Sunny. Thank you, Alexa and Preston, for being here. I'm interested in anything that will help me talk to people without totally offending them. So thank you for this concept of dignity. I look forward to hearing more.
Okay. Diane, why don't you tell us why you're here today and who you are?
Okay, I'm with the League of Women Voters, the Bloomington/Monroe County, Indiana branch, and on the DEI committee. And I appreciate being invited to this. And I'm really curious about the about the Dignity Index, and would love to know if there's a website where I could learn more about it.
Thank you, Diane. And yes, there is. We will make sure you get that information. Harriet, would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I'm Harriet Henry, and Sunny and we're high school classmates. So we have Zoomed before on a regular basis, and she just told me about this opportunity. And I would really like to be able to maybe be able to discuss without a problem with people in my own family who see things very differently than I do.
Thank you, Harriet. Judy, would you introduce yourself, please, and say why you're here today?
I'm Judy East, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of Brown County, Indiana. And I heard about this book first through a group that I belong to on Sunday mornings at the Methodist Church here called the Green Room, where we discuss social issues. And this book came highly recommended by one of our members. And I just thought that when the League was going to do a presentation, it was a wonderful coincidence. So I'm very curious. I don't know anything about it yet.
Thank you, Judy. Mary.
Hi, I'm Mary Bullock, and I'm a friend of Sunny's here in Indiana. And when she talked about this, I thought, goodness, this is something that we need not only now in America because of the contentiousness of politics, but maybe throughout the world. And so that's why I'm here, to learn.
Thank you very much, Mary. Stephanie.
Yes, my name is Stephanie Smith. I'm also a friend of Sunny's, and she knows me well and thought that this would be something that I would really find interesting and beneficial. So that's why I'm here.
I also know her family, and I thought it would be beneficial for her family.
Well, that too.
Kathy, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Kathy Roundtree. I'm another League member here in Brown County. I really appreciated the book, and like several other people, I have differences in my own family of perspectives. And then just living in Brown County is a very conservative place. One thing I noticed was that the book came out in 2011, and I'm interested in learning from the folks in practice how you are putting these things into practice now, and what do you, just sharing with us your experiences around our current internal conflicts. Thank you.
Jane, would you introduce yourself?
I'm Jane Huey, and I'm another high school friend of Sunny's. This intrigues me because for about a year, I've been participating in a group discussion at church called Living Room Conversations. And the idea is to discuss controversial or potentially controversial subjects in a civil manner. And so this sort of appealed to me because of that, and also because of just the general situation we're in.
Thank you, Jane. Karen, would you introduce yourself?
I'm Karen Lunsford from the League in Johnson County, Indiana, and I'm hoping to get some big insights to how I can converse more meaningfully and forcefully, yet respectably, to get my legislators and congressmen to do their job, especially upholding the constitutions that they've sworn to uphold.
Thank you, Karen. Bill, would you like to introduce yourself and your wife and why you're here today?
Bill Walters, and like Judith, we're part of the Green Room of the United Methodist Church here in Nashville. I'm on the Community Foundation Board, and I just am so concerned about the situation locally, nationally, and internationally. And I just hope that somehow I can learn how to be more effective in talking to people who have different views and share different ideas than I do. And I'll let Ann talk to her reasoning.
I'm Ann Walters, and besides everything that Bill said, we got the League of Voters newsletter. The book was cited there, and anything that Sunny is involved with, we know is great. So here we are.
Thank you for that, Anne. That was very sweet. Thank you. Pam. Pam Rader, are you there? Maybe she took a break.
She's on mute.
No, I just had to figure out how to unmute.
Oh,
I'm with the League of Women Voters in Nashville, and Sunny really touted this book. And usually I have another meeting on Monday nights to go to, and but because of the snow, I didn't go. So I'm here, and I don't really have any expectations. Just see what happens and what I learn and what comes up for me.
Pam, thank you very much. And sometimes it's important to have low expectations so that we can
Less
have our
pressure on
mind
us.
blown. Anyway, okay, Martha, would you like to introduce yourself? And you will have to unmute. I will tell you, Martha is one of my high school friends also that I've been promoting this with. We have a little group that we Zoom with.
Nice.
And so anyway, she may be away from her screen. Bill, would you like to introduce yourself and say why you're here today?
Yes, Bill, and I am part of the Green Room, part of the League, part of DEI discussions, and a proud member of this community, and just interested in this book because it's just kind of exciting and see what people have to say about it.
Great. Thank you very, very much. And so now I think we're going to turn this over to Preston and Alexa, and you have the floor.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's really great to meet you all, and no pressure. Like I said, a lot of expectations out there. Hopefully we can we can really hit all of them. Just to preface too, I'm really excited. We're going to dive into a little bit of Donna's book that you all have been mentioning, but really what we're hoping to communicate and demonstrate for you is what is the project that we work on that is in a lot of ways an extension of what Donna was working on in her book and her model. And she actually advised us early on in the process of creating the Dignity Index. So we'll get to all that. It's a good story, but I'm going to start and I'm going to share some slides if that's okay to kind of create some visuals, and hopefully we'll get interactive as well as we walk through this. Let me queue up our slides.
I just want to commend you, Sunny. I feel like I need to get your, I need to figure out how to I've only been graduated from high school for 8 years, and I haven't kept in touch with anyone. And so I need to step up my game.
Well, I have to admit that some of these individuals had fallen off my radar for a while I was working full time, but I have to give Harriet a lot of credit for reconnecting us, and so I feel very blessed to have been able to keep in touch and reestablish those relationships.
We all fell away while we were raising families and all that. So came back together during a high school reunion and found out we had a similar worldview.
No way.
Yeah, that was it.
Love that. Love that. Martha, did you have a question before we start? I see a hand raised.
I think Martha would agree that she's not the most adept person with technology. So
all right.
I'm just glad she's tuned in.
Yeah, we'll keep moving then.
Feel free
like
to
I
put
mentioned,
stuff in the chat, Martha, if you need.
Yes, please. So we represent the Dignity Index. Like Sunny said, I'm an associate working with our government initiative and corporate, and Alexa is one of our student ambassadors. But the Dignity Index really, in a lot of ways, came from a lot of what Donna's work started out as. And it's around this concept, this idea that dignity really is something that can be kind of a key indicator of our future. Before I really dive in, I do want to start with a quick story. Early on in my work, with this group, like Sunny said in my bio, I worked as a student first and then came on full time. I have a colleague that I work with, and at that time, our focus was higher education. How do we get students involved? And we were working on a slide deck that looks very similar to this, but it had a little bit of a different headline. If I can click through the slides, it was this: Dignity, the Foundation of a New Patriotism. Now, to kind of set the context for this story, and you spend enough time around us, you'll definitely know where our allegiances fall. But I tend to lean right. My colleague at the time that I was working with tends to lean left. We got to this deck, and as thinking about students, she kind of spoke up and was like, "Hey, I want to talk about the concept of patriotism. I don't know if that will resonate. I'm worried that it'll alienate some students." And as a very patriotic person myself, leaning into some of those conservative values, I rolled my eyes at first. I was kind of like, "Oh boy, here we go. Gotta haggle over the concept of patriotism." But what I realized was that was kind of a moment of contempt for her that I saw. And instead of leaning into that and trying to battle her or fight her on it, I took a step back. I remembered what we had been taught, going through the process of the Dignity Index. And I thought, maybe I'm going to sit and listen. And she went on to explain. And what I was able to, I think, understand from that experience was, wow, I see this very differently than some of the people we were about to stand in front of and talk to. And had I just had my blinders on and just gone in and been like, nope, this is what we're doing, we're using this headline, I maybe would have alienated half my audience and they wouldn't have resonated. And our goal was to try to help them adopt it. So while I still may disagree, I still may have my perspectives on what she was talking about, my ability to listen, step back and say, hey, maybe I don't have this all figured out and maybe I'm not right, allowed for us to have this really meaningful conversation and open my eyes to seeing things a little bit differently. And that's really the power of the Dignity Index. So going back to the beginning, a lot of this came from, and our ability to step back were because of these three individuals. These are kind of our leadership. Tim Shriver, who is the CEO and founder of our organization, also the chair of Special Olympics, Tammy Pfeiffer and Tom Roschert, co-creators of the Dignity Index. They came in and taught us about a very specific principle. And what you'll see, and the reason why I mentioned them, is that their journey as they kind of arrived at creating the Dignity Index together was very interesting and very influenced by Donna's book. But essentially, our first training, we sat down, they covered one important principle, and that is the divisions we see in our country are not coming from the fact that we disagree or we have differences of opinion or we have different backgrounds. It's because of the contempt that we have for who we think the other is, that other side, the person on the other side, whether it's friends, family, some random person you don't even know, that you find yourself on the other side from this contempt that we have from each other. And this really comes from two works, one a little, from Donna, but also from a book called Love Your Enemies by Arthur Brooks. In his book, he talks about how we have this cultural addiction to contempt in our society right now. It's the reason why we're so polarized, and if we want to fix that polarization problem, we have to solve the contempt problem. The contempt I have for you, not because we're different or we disagree, but because of this contempt. Donna talks about it in the framing of dignity violations, which we synonymously use dignity violation with using contempt against somebody or having contempt for somebody. As she states here, if you violate somebody's dignity repeatedly, you'll get a war or a divorce, a revolution. And that's because this dignity violation, like our instant response, is to seek revenge, is to hit back. So like I mentioned in the previous slide, Tammy Pfeiffer, one of our co-founders, she was reading Arthur Brooks. This is where she was really diving into these concepts of contempt, and it was making a lot of sense. And then she kind of converged with the other co-founders. But I want to quickly I know, I'm sorry, I don't want to throw data at you. It's like, oh, boring. But this data actually comes from a very popular pollster who shared this with the National Governors Association, which we participated in. So he was presenting this to governors across the country, talking about polarization and why it's such a problem. And these are some of the effects we see from contempt. One of the big ones is that we're censoring ourselves. And most staggering for us too is that those younger Americans, how it's almost they're twice as likely to censor themselves because of contempt. A lot of you all mentioned, having difficult conversations with family members, right? This statistic showing, we're divided. People are breaking off relationships. We're cutting people out of our lives because of the contempt that we have for each other that often gets built up through some of these difficult conversations, especially around politics. So you're like, yeah, wow, okay, that's a lot. We get everybody's divided. But this is kind of when we think about the concept of contempt, this is what we think about of what it looks like. And this comes a lot from a lot of the research that we did, dismissing people, calling names, questioning motives, mocking background, lumping people into a big group. So like I said, as Tammy was reading Arthur Brooks and diving into these concepts of contempt, that's when she kind of came together with Tom and Tim, and they were reading the book we're going to talk about today, and that is Dignity by Donna Hicks. And that really was this kind of melding of these two concepts of understanding our polarization, but finding hope and inspiration in what could potentially be the solution to this contempt problem that I just talked about. And that is, really the power of dignity. As Donna mentions here in this quote, it's transcends social distinctions, gender, race, ethnicity. It's this powerful concept, because the concept of dignity is something that we have at birth. It's inherent in who we are as human beings. And so they kind of came together around this. Okay, maybe there's a solution here to help with this contempt problem. So I do want to take a pause here really quickly and focus on this book, like many of you mentioned, by Donna. Really powerful book, but the specific portion I want to reference is what she talks about in the book, which is her 10 elements of dignity. What she's been able to frame in her book are these very specific concepts that, when violated, really is where a lot of conflict comes from, and that breakdown in conversation. Donna, to give Donna credit, she's built her dignity model around a lot of research. Some specifically is many of you, if you've read the book, maybe have seen, working with high conflict groups. She was in high conflict zones where, families had been at war with each other for, decades. And among a lot of the ways that she was trying to break through with some of these groups, interestingly enough, these concepts of dignity, these 10 elements of dignity, was really where she saw the breakthroughs. And again, it's not tested in very difficult scenarios and situations. So I want to take a minute. Hopefully you can all see kind of these 10 elements of dignity. But want to point out something interesting and a stat that we got from Donna. If you had to take a guess at what you think in the workplace is one of the more, I know we're going to take it to the work context, take it out of politics into the work context. What do you think people, if they were surveyed, which Donna mentioned the statistic, what the most violated element of dignity they felt is? Can I take a guess? There's not necessarily no wrong answers, but there is an interesting thing to highlight here. Any ideas?
You would think recognition, people would seek that in the workplace.
Yeah, definitely. That was definitely a big one, high up there.
And acknowledgement.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see me?
Yes.
Yep.
We can now.
Wonderful. I hit all the right buttons. Inclusion.
Inclusion, yeah. Now, like I said, I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer to this, as far as that these all are, were big elements of what people said. But interestingly enough, the highest one they cited was safety. which I know can kind of be confusing because maybe you think of that like physical safety, but in the context of what they were surveying, it was, this ability to speak out in meetings and conversations without feeling this, like they'll be attacked for what they share. And I think that is, a concept I think we all sometimes, there's the people that will talk regardless and they're very loud, obviously. I think a lot of us are, we don't want to say anything because we don't want to be shamed or silenced or any type of way, this ability to not be able to say what we think. So interesting stuff. So like I said, our team working with a lot of these concepts that came from Donna's book and her work and other social science and anthropology and, political science and history, really kind of formulated these concepts of what does dignity look like? It's this offering others care and attention, hearing what they've been through, acknowledging gifts and accomplishments, making sure they feel free to speak. I think, yes, this is a video. I'm going to tee this up really quickly. Interestingly enough, while these concepts might be very powerful, and I appreciate what one of you said, what you were hoping to get out of this is, dignity is great, right? We're really pushing like, we need to treat people with dignity, but it's more than just we need to be nice or we need to be civil, because the reality is we need to be able to say what we think. You should be able in America to stand for what you believe in and do so with fervor. And on the other side, we should be able to have, like many of you talked about, have discussions and conversations where we're trying to get to the bottom of truth and almost holding people accountable to certain things. But how do you do that with dignity? Because it sounds like, what we're seeing today in our culture is the way that people are, the method that they're taking is the contempt route. They're saying, in order to hold people accountable, I need to be contemptuous towards them. But really what we see is there's an alternative, and I'm going to let our founder, one of our founders, Tom, talk through what that looks like.
You can make a powerful case and challenge an opponent and hold someone accountable and do it with dignity. And the way that would be done is you're not doing any name calling. That's out. You're not labeling someone. You're not sneering at them. That's gone. And then you take up the criticism in the language of decisions, actions, the outcome of those actions, who gets hurt, and you invite the other person to respond. And if you really want to take it to a higher level, instead of saying just, this is who you are, you move to this is what you do, and you move better than that to this is the thing that you did, to ultimately maybe this is what we can do together. So if you're challenging someone with dignity, it's more like you're trying to solve a problem than win an argument. So it's not common. We don't see a lot of examples in our culture, but it's absolutely possible. And as we continue our movement, we'll have many more ready examples to show, but absolutely without a question, it is possible to hold someone, to challenge someone, and to hold them accountable and still treat them with dignity.
So the rest of that video is on our website, and you can find it. But I want to make sure I didn't skip
Takes all
slide.
the fun out of it.
I know, right? Sorry.
Frankly. That's where I got problems. I just want to, kill them.
Yeah, right. I know it's tricky. But what we see from Donna's work is that while that might feel good, it might help vent. And definitely if your goal is to just, hammer that person, contempt can be the way. But what the problem is that it doesn't help us ease our divisions. It doesn't help us get to solutions and problems when we have to work with the other side. And what we really see is that dignity helps us do that. But I know how you feel. I know sometimes in that moment, that's why it's difficult. So this is kind of our first dignity principle. Like I said, contempt causes division, dignity eases division, which is a powerful principle in and of itself. And before I introduce Alexa here, I just want to finish with one last concept from Donna and kind of our origin story. And that is, this concept of if indignity tears us apart, dignity can put us back together, which when our team kind of stumbled upon these concepts of Donna, especially this one, it was kind of like this aha moment. Oh my gosh. Okay, in order to help things in the country, all we need to do is convince people to stop using contempt and use more dignity. Problem solved. Great, we're good. Go home, right? End of presentation, essentially. But yeah, okay, that's difficult, right? It's not that easy. And even if a concept is true, how do we get people to adopt the concept, to embrace the concept, which is actually wrapped up in a bigger question of how do people change? And as they were formulating these ideas and working with political consultants, they kind of came up with this idea of, well, wait a minute, people love scores, people love competing, people love to measure things. That's what we do. It's kind of innately what people lean towards. What if we could actually measure dignity or the way that we treat each other? And that was really combining all these concepts. They set out to figure out how to measure dignity and birth the dignity index. So I'm going to kick it over to Alexa, and she's going to run us through just exactly what the dignity index is and the levels of us, and help us understand exactly how it works. And to your point, you'll start to see how our organization is using the dignity index to take what Donna, worked on in her dignity model and really apply it in the everyday and kind of the day-to-day and our interactions. You'll see what we've done with it. So Alexa, over to you.
Thanks, Preston. So what the founders of the Dignity Index found, like Preston was saying, is that when we are able to measure something, that's when we're best able to maximize it, because we can have an idea of actually what's going on instead of just saying, okay, everyone be more dignified. And then it's like, I don't know what that means. I don't know how to do that. So they came up with the Dignity Index, and it is an 8-point scale from 1 to 8 that measures how we respond in a moment of disagreement. And so it's kind of split into 2. We have 1 to 4, which is what we deem our contempt side, and then 5 to 8 is our dignity side. And each of the points represent a mindset in a moment. So we don't score people, we are scoring language. So we don't say that there are 3s or there are 7s, that people are these things one or another. But in each moment, in each disagreement, we have an opportunity to choose how we respond, and that response can fall somewhere on this scale. So we're going to go through each of these points, because when we are able to understand kind of where we are on the scale, we can choose where we want to be. So we'll start in the contempt side. So 1 through 4, and we're going to go down, because when you are able to see it amplify, it's kind of better to it's easier to conceptualize contempt. So we start at a 4, which is we're better than those people. They don't really belong. They're not one of us. And one of the key elements of contempt is separation. So when we hit a 4 at contempt, it is me versus you, or us versus them. There's some element of separation, whether that is on accident, like you were just put on a different team in the workplace, or it's on purpose and you are deciding that they don't value the same things that you value, and so you've created a sense of separation. But when we separate from one another, we start to create an ability to see us as better than someone else. And so we start with a 4. I'm better than you. And then we go down to a 3. And at a 3, we're the good people and they're the bad people. So this is when we start name calling. This is very much in contempt. This is who you are. Like, you are defined by this decision that you're making, and it's a bad decision. And so it's me versus you. We can't exist in the same space. And so we are attacking their moral character. We want them to fail. We're disdainful. It's very much like, I deserve credit for all of the good things that are happening, and you should take the blame for all of the bad things, or that group should take the blame. So then we continue to escalate, and we get to a 2. Those people are evil. They're going to destroy the country if we let them. It's us or them. Now it really is like, I don't even want to be in the same space as you. I don't want to acknowledge that you exist because you're evil. And not only are you evil, but you are promoting evil and you're going to destroy us. So this is when we can start believing that people are an existential threat. Or when people say, like, I'm going to move to Canada, like you are increasing the separation and you want to see them suffer. You say, I want to see them get what they deserve because they're a danger to everything that I value. And then we get to the deepest level of contempt. One, they're not even human. It's our moral duty to destroy them before they destroy us. This is when we start calling for violence and acting on it. So there's a difference between Martha saying like, oh, I disagree. Like I want to kill him. And that's in a contempt kind of space because you're like, I really don't believe that your opinion.
I've been spat upon. Spat upon. Has anyone else had somebody spit at them because they didn't agree with them?
So that's kind of where we're at, Martha, is that those people, whoever spit on you, they're showing you contempt. And when you are being shown contempt, your automatic response is to want to respond back in that same way. Because they're saying, I'm better than you. And you're like, excuse me, I am a person who deserves to be treated with dignity. And so I don't understand why you would do that. Why would you treat me that way? And so it's really easy then to respond, to want to defend ourselves, which is totally human to want to defend ourselves. If someone's saying that you're not human, then it's really easy to throw that back at them. And it's really draining to us. And I think that as y'all were expressing like why you're here, like I could kind of hear it in your voice that you're just concerned for the country and you are kind of like tired of the contempt that is happening, tired of people spitting on you because you disagree, tired of the media that just is filled with hate and anger every day. And so we live kind of in this space where contempt is the go-to, but it doesn't have to be. So let's like take a deep breath and like, and what I was saying before is this separation. This is Martin Luther King Jr. He said, I'm convinced that men hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other, and they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other. When we don't communicate with people, we start to, we don't, if we are separated from someone, we don't communicate with them. If we don't communicate them, we don't know them. And then that becomes an unknown, and unknowns are scary. And so then to protect ourselves from what we don't know is we start to hate. And that's the pattern that we see with contempt. But there's another option. So the thing that I really love about the Dignity Index is that when you know the points on the scale and when you can recognize contempt, you have an opportunity to decide how you want to respond. You don't have to automatically fall into contempt in response to someone else violating your dignity. You can choose if that's how you want to respond in that moment. So we get to the dignity side of the scale, the 5 through 8. And this really is like a deep breath, like part of my work at the Dignity Index. A lot of what I do is I find passages and things that people have said and I score them. And when you find something that is on the dignity side of the scale, it's like a celebration. You're like, yay, like it's so nice to, like, it feels different. And just between a 4 and a 5, like just a small shift in how you are talking about or with someone else can really make a huge emotional difference. And so at a 5, instead of saying, we're better than you, we start saying, you know, you have a right to be here also. It's your country. I don't have to agree with what you say, but I'll listen to what you say. I don't have to tell you that I believe in what you're doing, but I'm also not going to call you names. So I'm going to tell you what I believe and why I believe it. I'm going to focus on the facts and your actions. And I can still hear, like Karen was saying, that you wanted to learn how to be able to forcefully communicate in also a respectful way, the things that you believe in. You can be passionate here and still have shifted into the dignity side of the scale. So I'm speaking openly, I'm explaining what I believe, but I'm not doing it with contempt. But then we start to escalate again. We can go even further. Not only do you have a right to be here, but I want to talk to you. And I want to figure out what we have that is similar. I want to build a relationship with you. I want to have some basis for cooperation. We have more in common than we think. And so this is when we start really bridging the separation and getting to know someone else, closing the gap. I can see the good in you. I want to engage with you. And I find it really satisfying to be able to do that. And then we get to continue up. So as we're moving further up, think of times when someone has treated you in this way where they've maybe crossed that separation and started to engage with you and how it made you feel. If you can think of moments like that, because they do happen and they're really special when they do. So at a 7, it's not just I want to see what we have in common, but I want to see what we disagree with. I want to fully engage with you and discuss our values and interests that we don't share. And I'm open to admitting my mistakes and changing my mind. So here I want to discuss our disagreements because I'm curious about what you've been through and how you got to believe what you believe in. And here we start to defend the dignity of the other side, even if it is at the criticism of our own side. So if I am discussing something with someone who's on another side than I am, and my colleagues start to be contemptuous towards them, and I turn around and I defend their dignity, that's at a 7 when I'm able to risk my own belonging in my group because I believe in the dignity of this other person. Requires a great deal of humility to be in a 7. And then we go to an 8. An 8 is when you are able to see everyone with their inherent worth and dignity, even at the greatest, what's the word? The greatest point of conflict. So this can be this can be victims of genocide or individuals in the Holocaust who are able to forgive those who were guarding them in concentration camps. Like those stories are so almost shocking, because it's like, how can you forgive and treat someone with dignity who saw you as so subhuman? How can you turn around from someone who was treating you like a 1 and treat them as an 8? It's really amazing that these individuals, they can absorb the pain of being hated without passing it on. They don't have a sense of moral superiority, and they will defend the dignity of the most demonized. So those individuals who are who everyone says they don't deserve to live, they turn around and say, they do. I don't condemn anyone. If I'd suffered what they did, I might have done what they did. So we have our scale. And as we go up the scale, we move from this ability to see good in others, to being more authentic, to being curious, and then to being humble. And so it develops these other skills that are so vital to having valuable discussions. And I'm sure that in your living room conversations that some of you have participated in, that you start to see this. Because when we're able to see the good in others, we're able to start feeling safe enough to show them the good in us. And then to start asking questions and learning more. And then eventually to be able to say, you know, maybe I don't understand everything as well as I think that I do.
I'm going to jump in here real quick. We have about, I know, 10 minutes left, right, Sunny? I want to make sure we leave some time for questions at the end. Don't want to keep you all too long. So you're muted. Sorry, I'm not hearing you.
Yeah, sorry, I was sneezing, so I turned off my sound. So, you know, 10 to 15 minutes, we're a little bit flexible. I didn't put any hard stops on anything, but that's good.
Great. I know we've been going for a minute, and I do definitely want to leave some time for questions, but we would love to show you, and Alexa, keep taking it going, but we'd love to show you kind of what this looks like. We'd love to show you some examples of language that we've applied the Dignity Index to and what we might score it. And Alexa will run you through that. And if you all would like to participate in now that you've got the crash course, you know, work with us to see what these examples might score on the Dignity Index.
I like it. That sounds good.
Go ahead, Alexa.
We're gonna try it out. So I think if we want to pull up the scoring guide. So if you're able to pull up this guide, this can be really helpful in because I just threw all of that at you. And so how do you remember that? That's tricky. So this QR code can take you to this guide, or in our chat, in the chat, I put in the dignity.us website, and you can go to resources there and pull up the tab, the scoring guide as well. And so that you can continue to reference it and think back to it.
All right.
Okay, so we're gonna do 3 examples, and I'll read them, and then I'd like to see your thoughts on what you think this might be scored as. So either put a number up on your hands or put it in the chat, 1 through 8. So this is sports commentators, a conversation about sports commentators. He's still a buffoon and a horrible host. McAfee's biggest problem, I'll tell you what it is, his ego cannot handle living in the shadows of the far more popular, way more talented Stephen A. Smith. Do we have a guess on what that might be scored as? 1 through 8? Some 3s, 4.
3. Yeah.
Can you show the list again?
Yeah.
Go back to the list.
Let me I'm gonna put, there's a resource page. If you go to the Dignity website,
Dignity US.
Dignity.us, and then there's a resource page there. You can pull it up on your computer, so you can, but I can go back quickly. Let me share back my screen.
Here is the resource page.
Oh no.
And it's been spoiled.
I just spoiled the big reveal. I'm sorry.
Oh, no.
Gave us
That's
the
okay.
answer.
It is a 3. Yay!
Okay, good.
So a lot of you were all correct. All the numbers that I saw on that, it's on the contempt side of the scale. That's something that we found is that, I mean, since each of those points can get a little bit nuanced, it can be tricky to determine one between another, but most everyone can determine whether something is contemptuous or dignified. So in this example, he's calling him a buffoon. And so he's calling names, he's looking down on them. He's saying, not only are you a buffoon, but this other person is much more popular, much more successful. So it's a us versus them. We get the credit for the good things, you get the blame for the bad things. Does that make sense on a 3, why that one would be a 3?
It certainly makes sense to me. And it also, I've always been told that I'm too nice. And see, I gave it a 4 because I was giving him a little benefit of the doubt. So it reaffirms I need to be more real.
Which being nice is not a bad thing. But you
Giving people the
can,
benefit
one
of the
thing,
doubt, it's great.
yeah, one thing about the scale though is that it is an opportunity to just say like, hey, this is how this person's treating the other person or how I'm treating them. We've got another example. This is someone who ran for Congress in a recent, this past election cycle. They said, recipients of tax cuts worth tens of millions do not use the saved money to support local business and eat out more often. Instead, the money is used to purchase assets such as land, contributing to asset price inflation, which makes housing less affordable or even out of reach of many. What number do we think that this might be? 1 out of 8. 1 to 8.
I'm not going to spoil it this time.
Yeah. Keep it to yourself, Preston.
One thing I will say while we think about this is that while our team has worked to validate the dignity index and solidify what we think as accurate scores, really what the interesting thing about the dignity index is that seeing scores differently provides an opportunity for conversation and have an understanding of why do you see it the way that you see it, why see it the way that I see it. There's been applications we use the dignity index where we need to be precise, and there's been other applications where it's really about the conversation, how we're seeing, are we identifying contempt, are we identifying dignity. So I guess that goes to, I say that to say, don't worry if you're feeling like, oh man, I wasn't even thinking right, but it looks like we're doing good so far.
Yeah, we've got some 4s. Karen thinks it's a 6. This one is a 5. So it's right at the edge of our dignity scale. That it's very much this bullet point of I share my views with no contempt, so they're easier for others to hear. It's speaking openly about the facts. It's saying this is what is happening. That the dignity index doesn't take into account whether or not that is like truthful, whether or not that is actually what's happening, but it's being stated in this factual based way that is not putting others down in the conversation. Then we have one last example here. This one, in honor of President's Day, is from one of our founding fathers. This is Benjamin Franklin, way back when. I confess that there are several parts of this Constitution which I do not at present approve, but I am not sure I shall never approve them. For having lived long, I have experienced many instances of being obliged by better information or fuller consideration to change opinions even on important subjects, which I once thought right but found to be otherwise. It is therefore the case that the older I grow, the more apt I am to doubt my own judgment and to pay more respect to the judgment of others. Do we have guesses on what this one might be? Jude thinks it's a 7. Sunny thinks it's an 8.
I think Bill said 7.
7.
Thinking 7s.
Yes.
7s and 8s.
This one is a 7. Good job, guys. It's a humble space to be. It's saying, I don't agree with parts of the Constitution, but I'm not saying I will never agree with them. In fact, I'm open to being wrong. I'm open to learning more from others who think differently than me and taking those opinions and reevaluating what I believe. So it requires a great deal of humility.
Which is actually, sorry, maybe I'm just up in my patriotism, but it's a pretty profound thing to say when we consider he was considering this over the Constitution, the very thing that our country is based on, right? If he's willing to say, hey, maybe I don't have this all figured out about something so important, maybe we can apply that same thing on ourselves of, maybe the small conversations I'm having with my friends, maybe I miss something here. It's like this great humility on such an important thing. And a great example. I love that example. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to chime in. Go ahead, Alexa.
No, that's great. I think if we keep going on our little slide. So this is one of our other dignity principles, is the mirror effect. So it can be really easy to say, yeah, dignity is really important to use. They and other those other people are really contemptuous, right? And so those other people should really start being more dignified. But so we think of the dignity index as a tool for judging other people, but actually it's really important to see it as a mirror for ourselves. Because when you use contempt, it's hard to see it, but when you see it, it's hard to use it. So for a very brief example, I posted on social media during the presidential election. I said, this isn't an election between this person and this person. This is an election between tyranny and democracy. And so we all need to fall in line and figure it out. And then I saw on Facebook a couple weeks later, someone said the exact same thing, but their party affiliation was flipped. So they were also saying this is tyranny versus democracy, but just a different perspective. And it made me think, oh, my bad. Oh, that was contemptuous. That was me. That was my bad. That was very us versus them. And so I actually posted an apology, another post that said, I'm sorry for doing that. But what Preston might very briefly cover is a culture of dignity, is that apology post got no views, but my initial contemptuous us versus them post blew up. And so that's something important to think about. Preston.
Yes, I'm going to wrap us up here, but I see your hand is raised, Diane, so I want to let you ask a question. If there are any questions, we can kind of briefly take those right now. Like I said, I want to leave some time for questions, and then I'll quickly wrap up kind of this culture of this dignity culture and what we're doing as a group.
Okay, thanks. It's so interesting. Thank you. And in my retirement, I took on a new career, which was mediation. And one of the things I found problematic is the idea of talking with someone in good faith, or if good faith isn't there, it's very hard to have a productive discussion. Just a very quick example of, say you're trying to have a discussion on immigration. It could be that someone is talking about the pros and cons, financial, otherwise, of an immigration policy. And it turns out that there's a lot of racism behind that, on that person's part. So they're really not talking in good faith, and or they have some hidden agenda or something like that, something they're trying to accomplish and so forth. So it just seems that good faith is a critical aspect of a productive discussion, and a discussion where there's dignity on both sides.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And, the connection I make to some of what we've talked about is, hopefully, as you continue to use dignity, even if you're being, treated with contempt, it keeps the door open to potentially getting back to the good faith conversation. And now that doesn't mean that we're just asking you to just sit there and take contempt, especially when it's really egregious contempt. Definitely you need to prioritize your own safety, whether it be physical or mental. But what we've seen in the power of dignity is how, in fact, I heard a story just the other day in one of our trainings, and this woman was talking about an interaction she had with her family, and approached them, and they started talking about a difficult conversation, and she received contempt. And like we talked about earlier, her first reaction was to give contempt back. And on that second, her use of contempt back, it was her father that she was talking to. He actually flipped and he used dignity. He said, you know what? I might be wrong. I might be fair. And she said that made all the difference. It was like the conversation changed from this back and forth of contempt exchanges to, oh, now the door just opened. We can get on a better conversation, and maybe, to get in a good faith argument, we might actually have a chance there. Again, it's not a perfect sign, doesn't work every time, but what we know for a fact is if your response to contempt is with contempt in kind, the conversation will never be productive. And maybe that's what you're trying to do. Maybe at the end of the day, you don't care if it's productive. You don't actually want to persuade anybody. You just want to use contempt. Again, it's your prerogative, to go about these conversations the way that you want. But what we've seen as we've tested this and used it, there's been, almost no scenario where someone was using contempt and that persuaded them or changed their mind or got them to change as a human being, or even, collaboration, because it just doesn't happen because it's so that dignity violation, back to what Donna was talking about, is so difficult to overcome once you do that, if dignity isn't present. So I really appreciate the comment. It's a great point.
Are there any other questions for Preston or Alexa? Please just jump in if you have a question.
I don't know where you're going to find people to have this conversation with.
In terms of,
I live in the most probably conservative county in Indiana. It's redder than red.
yeah,
And if I try to even start on a even scale, which I probably wouldn't because I'm totally pissed off. But anyway, I've been marching and protesting and petitioning and voting and campaigning since 1970. And look at the shit we're in now. Anyway,
yeah.
where do you find somebody that's on the other side that's going to talk to you in a reasonable manner? They do not exist here.
Could I tell a story? Mind if I tell a story, Martha? Because I see you that it can be difficult to, when you say I want to talk to you, I want to hear where you're coming from, and they might not want to share their story, and that's real.
Oh, they'll share it, and they'll share exactly what Fox News told them to say that day.
Mm-hmm.
All 5 or 6 of them in a row. You get the exact same words back. I mean, honestly, who are you going to talk to about this? I don't see people who are reasonable enough to do this. I'm certainly not reasonable enough anymore.
Yeah. I can quickly, if I wrap up with some of those slides, I can show you some of the audience we've actually been able to talk to about this, and some of those recipient, and hopefully it gives you a little bit of hope for some of the audiences that have accepted this. Let me go back to
the idea is wonderful. I just don't think the people exist who would do it.
Yeah.
On either side.
No, I disagree with that. So I think that I've been able to enjoy conversations by using a lot of the principles of dignity. Let me hear more of what you have to say. And, I think I agree with you on that point. And, you've been violated a whole lot, Martha, and that's just really unfortunate. It's just really not fun for you.
Being in politics, buddy, it's a tough game. And we all better start looking out for the people coming with the guns, because they're coming.
Yeah, I mean, and definitely that's what our project here is meant to. Hopefully we can get to a place where we avoid that. And our tagline is what we really believe in, that the Dignity Index is meant to ease divisions, prevent violence, and solve problems together. And we've seen how that is the case. Like I mentioned, we've taken this national. We've worked in a lot of different areas. We've worked with both locally elected leaders. Here's an example of the Utah League of Cities and Towns that we've worked with, but we've worked with other Utah League of Cities and Towns across the country. We go from local government all the way up to higher government as well. There's a very conservative Republican governor in Oklahoma who has adopted the Dignity Index, and he runs all his communications through the Dignity Index before he speaks out. And there's been some instances there where it's really become important, and we're working on recruiting more governors as part of our effort. We luckily got to be a part of a lot of the governor of Utah's initiative when he ran the National Governors Association, and have been able to connect there. So we're working in a lot of different lanes there. We have a corporate consulting, like I mentioned, and we have a handful of corporate businesses as we see, businesses really taking the lead in social influence and what they're able to do with the platforms that they have. And we have a multinational corporation that has collaborated with us deeply on that, and is very excited about that. So there's examples of that as well. Higher education, like I mentioned, that's where I got my start. We've collaborated with over 25 universities across the country. We're not quite yet in Indiana on the on the higher ed.
You won't be in Indiana.
But I'll say it's a mix of a lot of different universities, both ranging from very, private conservative universities like the one that Alexa actually goes to, and liberal arts colleges on the East Coast as well. And really wanting to empower students and seeing, a presence there that really is resonating with this message. We also just recently launched our youth edition, focused on K through 12 education as well, and we have stakeholders across the country working on that. Finally, I want to invite you, if you'd like to continue, if you found it was fun, that scoring exercise was fun, like Alexa walked you through. We have a Dignity Daily game where you can log on to our website. It's on the Dignity, thedaily.dignity.us, and continue to try your hand at some of the passages that we put into that. Those ones are a little bit more current, so you can kind of get an idea of what we're seeing in our culture right now. And it's a fun interactive game, kind of like a Wordle, but you can score Dignity Index passages on the Dignity Index. So that's available on our website. Finally, well, hopefully we've, it made you excited about the Dignity Index in a lot of ways. Hopefully it's provided some hope. I know it's difficult when you've received a lot of contempt. And I would definitely hear you, Martha, on some of your perspectives on could this really work? I think it's a lot of us asked the question at the beginning of the project too, but as I've traveled the country and talked with people on, all sorts of from both sides of the spectrum on all sorts of issues and the breakthroughs that people have been able to have in our workshops, it's definitely given us a lot of hope. And we've been able to do it on a big scale in a lot of ways. So, and that's because of this last principle in a lot of ways. And Alexa talked a little bit about it. But, when we use contempt, it's hard to see it sometimes. And I think that's what we've talked a lot about here. But what we've seen from our work is when we start to see it, it then becomes hard to use it. If we have faith in human beings and this good faith idea, like you talked about, Diane, that people start to, I don't want to actually be that person. Now that I see the contempt, I actually don't want to be a 2 or 3 or talk in that way. And the Dignity Index really helps us see it. I want to finish actually with the slide that I missed here, and it was back to that dignity culture. And that's because, this is really what we're trying to push as far as promoting a dignity culture. We're using these concepts of Donna's dignity and the Dignity Index to create a culture where people can say what they think, but in a way that encourages others to say what they think. That's what our democracy is rooted in. We have to have disagreement. We have to see things differently. That's what makes America great in a lot of ways, and has helped America flourish in a lot of ways. But if we're saying it in a way that shuts down conversation, which is another way of saying when we're using contempt, that's all that does, is it shuts down the conversation. It creates more division. We can't work across our differences. So what we're really trying to do as far as the dignity culture is incentivize that. How do we incentivize people to use more dignity and less contempt? And that's why we're working in all of these avenues and working with big stakeholders to try to do that. So our last invitation to really wrap this up is, if you felt like something resonated with you, that you join this movement. We've had, like I mentioned, Governor Stitt has taken this pledge, and we're working to have more governors and more elected officials take it. But we also, as individuals, are trying to do our best to live up to that as well. And this concept of we have to have, in order to have our democracy flourish, we have to have healthy debate. And what we really see is that we can't have healthy debate without dignity. So that is all we have. I know we went a little bit over time. I'm happy to stick around for a couple more minutes if people have questions, but definitely want to turn it back over to Sunny if people want to get going. I know it's a little bit later where you're at than where I'm at. So we just appreciate the opportunity to be here in the conversation.
Thank you all very much for doing this. Really do appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Martha.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This was really helpful and enlightening. Thank you.
Yeah. I just want to thank Alexa and Preston so much for coming to try to help introduce a discussion of this book. I was intrigued with the book itself, and might still want to have a little bit more of a discussion about it between just us. But I think one of the things that stood out to me about reading this book almost more than anything is not only trying to create environments for productive conversation between people who disagree with each other, which is very hard to do in the current environment, but also coming to realize how much, if you engage in undignified responses to people, how much it hurts you at your core. And that was really a lesson that I took from the book as well. So if you wish to follow up on the further discussion, our DEI meetings are usually the third Monday evening of the month. So the next one would be March 17th. And we can actually start perhaps talking a little bit more about the book. We can have a follow-up discussion about this presentation after having had a month to try and apply some of the principles that Preston and Alexa have brought to us today, and see, if we think this is something that we can make bigger and better here in Indiana, which is, as Martha has pointed out, is a very challenging environment. So yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Preston, I'm so glad you're reaching out to schools, to elementary schools. This should be foundational information for children. So it's at their core, and maybe that can diminish the future antagonism in their generation.
Absolutely. That's
That
the
would
goal.
be good. Yeah.
I think what you've been doing is wonderful, and I really enjoy this presentation. And we can stay on, but I'm going to go ahead and end the recording.
Thank you very much, Sherry.